Yeah, so I don't have any prepared remarks. I was asked to give a few comments on sort of the current situation in the Middle East, and as things are changing with especially the U.S. policy towards the Middle East. I think one thing we have to figure out and understand is that the Middle East is an artificial region. It was created in a way by mixing two different regions, historical regions together. The Near East, which was under the sort of the influence of the Ottomans, the Near East Mediterranean region, and the Central Asia, Iranian Plateau, South Caucasus region, which was under the sort of the Iranian or Persian sort of sphere of influence. Only because of oil and because of the sort of the competition between colonial powers were these two regions mixed together into one called the Middle East. That picture of the Middle East, which was, again, part of the colonial imperial age and created all these different sectarian wars and all these different kind of animosity between various different tribal, national, cultural groups, that picture of the Middle East is increasingly changing. And I want to venture to you that the reason for that change, the reason for that new Middle East, we hear a lot about the new Middle East that Israel imagines. The Middle East is changing, but not because of the Israel's sort of vision of the Middle East. It is changing because of systemic reasons, and it is changing partly because of actions of Israel and the reaction to that. So with the Russia war on Ukraine, as it's called in the U.S., and with the October 7th, both of those developments have really spelled a different understanding for actors in the Middle East. So on the one side, for the first time in recent memory, all of the different major poles, nodes, and actors in the Middle East, from Turkey, Qatar, Iran, even Saudi Arabia, and this is the key point, are now seeing themselves in one front against what they see as unacceptable behavior by Israel. Now, I don't want to get into sort of moralistic and normative language about what Israel is doing is right or wrong, but the point is that the blank check support of the United States for Israel has allowed Israel to act far more than its own capacity and far more able to ignore its own national interests and act in overreaching and overstretching fashion. And in response, that has created an Iranian front and working together, even with Saudi Arabia and Turkey, to try to figure out what to do with what they believe to be an unstable and unsustainable situation in Palestine, in Gaza. Just not to bring that war only to the end, but the realization now is that Israel is not going to be satisfied until its own security dilemma is resolved, and its security dilemma is so big as to encompass perhaps the West Bank, parts of Syria, if not all of it. So that is creating repercussions in the region, and with that, this is the sort of new security environment that the Trump administration is coming back into. Now, in 2016, this was a very different region. The sectarian, problems were high and wide, and Saudi Arabia was a linchpin of U.S. policy. Saudi Arabia was the representative of a cline, what I call the Sunni traditionalist cline. It was different than Turkish Qatar cline, which was the Muslim Brotherhood, the radical Sunni cline, and it was different from the Iranian Shiite crescent or cline. So it was a different time, and Abraham Accords came on top of this already divided region. It kind of formalized what already existed. It made sense for Saudi Arabia at the time to work with Israel. It made sense for UAE and Persian Gulf countries to work with Israel. 2024 is an entirely different map. It's an entirely different situation. And one of the problems that I think the next administration might run into is mistaking 2024 and its strategy, its geopolitics, its conditions on the ground with 2016, and continue as if nothing has changed, and we're going to bring back Abraham Accords and make sure everybody can work according to our rules in the Middle East. And I think that is fundamentally misguided, partly because Saudi Arabia itself, as the leader of that sort of traditionalist cline, no longer wants to participate in that kind of one-sided alliance system. Partly because of domestic pressure, partly because even the Islamic Republic, as much as internal problems that it might have, is the most popular state in the Arab Main Street world. partly because of its response to Israel and being seen as the only country that has done anything to challenge or deter Israel. So there are domestic costs for Arab countries like Jordan, like UAE, like Saudi Arabia, by just bandwagoning with the West and Israel. So they can't afford to do that. At the same time as, again, the situation has changed. China has come in the region and organized a détente between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This was mentioned yesterday as well. Saudi Arabia and Iran are working together not because China has decreed that they have to work together, but China is playing the role that the United States used to play in the 40s and 50s, going and just saying, we should all get along so that we can get the trade flowing and we can all do business together. But China has been able to do this because America has been declining in its understanding, by pressuring too much, by overreaching too much, by doing what it did in Ukraine. It's showing itself as actually, an unreliable state to bandwagon with for a country like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia now wants to hedge its bets. Not only on one side, it wants to continue to be friendly with the United States. It has a military and security relationship with the United States, but it doesn't want to antagonize Iran because it's close, it is neighbor. There was a huge cost to Saudi Arabia because of that animosity. It doesn't want to antagonize China. It doesn't want to antagonize Russia. So Saudi Arabia is now in the position of really playing a kind of a positive neutrality case, which is a surprise to me more than anybody else, because I thought that Saudi Arabia will continue to be very ideological. But MBS has shifted on that front, and I think that's good news for everyone. So now we're talking about a détente that has moved to an entente phase. And with that, the question that is big on everyone's mind is whether or not there will be a kind of confrontation between the United States under the Trump administration and Iran, leading to a kind of strikes or war or what have you. And the problem that we see is that if the United States wants to just come in and do what Israel wants, or for Israel's benefit, in the case of making sure that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons, it will have to engage in strikes and help Israel into making those strikes. But the argument that traditionally was made, that as soon as a nuclear move is made on one side, there will be competition for nukes among all the other states, and Turkey will weaponize, and Saudi Arabia will weaponize. I want to dispute that today, and I would venture to think through if the monopoly on nukes that Israel has had and has enjoyed since the 70s is no longer something that the region as a whole and its security architecture can bear. So having a country like Iran with nuclear weapons, and again, nuclear weapons are always a defensive tool because others now share it. The only time it was used was when the United States was the only country that had it. So as Iran is losing its deterrence in the Levant, in Lebanon, around Israel, partly because of Israel's successes, it will make getting a nuclear weapon for Iran an inevitability, because it will have to make that decision realistically at some point. It might not be today, it might be in a few months, it might be in a year, but Iran will likely make that decision on a rational discourse. And if it does make that choice, then I don't know if the United States is prepared to actually go to war with Iran, or it might allow Israel to start attacking Iran, but it, at least to this point, believes that it can it doesn't have to go to war militarily and put U.S. troops on the ground. And, there are all these different priorities that the United States now has to deal with, from disengaging from the Middle East, from removing its troops from Syria and Iraq, that contradicts a kind of a more aggressive military response from the United States. So I think it's kind of what we see in terms of its, America's very strong rhetoric in support of Israel, and what it also wants, which is, ceasefire in Gaza, no more military intervention, no more wars in the Middle East. Those two might clash in terms because they don't have, they're in many ways contradictory, unless the United States comes to terms with a nuclear Iran. So I think there are those things to think about, as well as thinking through how a new regional security architecture is being formed that centers on Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia working together as much as for regional stability, as much as not trying to antagonize one another.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.